Okay, hands up. Who owns a car that you can't turn the fan up and down without going into the stupid the screen, like the kind of multi-unit screen? Hand up if you own a car that you literally have to go into a menu to turn the fan up and down. Stupid, right? Okay, back in the spring break, we rented a car. It was quite modern because it was a rental. It's a big debate in our family whether it's a Peugeot or a Peugeot. Peugeot, can't even say it. It's a French car. It's about a year old. And it was great in every way, but I was late picking up the car. We were in Edinburgh for the day, and we were late picking up the car because it was terrible traffic. So I was like, you stay in Edinburgh, see the castle, see the things. I'll go and get the car, and I'll come back into town. And, modern cars, they think they're so smart, so clever. So I'm trying to speak to Fee. At the same time, the car's speaking to me about something. And then I'm also on the ring road of Edinburgh thinking that's going to be the quickest way. And I'm like, wait, we used to live here, but like, how do you get here again? So I'm trying to get the GPS and trying to do all these things at once. And then all of a sudden, guess what happens? The windshield fogs up. And it's at that moment that I'm like, why change something that didn't need changed? So you're kind of, go with me on the right-hand side because you're in the UK. And so I'm like trying to do this at the same time, and then I look in my rearview mirror, and there's a police car like right there as I'm kind of like bouncing my phone, which I was not using, and doing all these other things, right? And I'm just like, and it was like the one thing you need is just like, up goes the fan, and then down goes the mist. Oh, why change something that didn't need changed? Okay, second thing from that trip, went to Nando's. Nando's is amazing. It's a South African restaurant that does chicken, awesome chicken. And back in the day when I used to live in London, you go to Nando's and it was like, you get this massive menu and it's pretty simple because it's like chicken, sides, spicy. How spicy you want it. Super easy, the way the menu was laid out. And the menu was big, right? So you had this like glorious, thing ahead of you. Anyone Nando's? Anyone? Yeah. Okay. So it's just like, when we started with COVID 4 years ago, we had to then say like, oh no, we don't do menus. You got to scan the code. Maybe 3 years ago when we opened up restaurants, scan the code. Believe me, condensing the Nando's menu to my phone was like deeply troubling because it's a quick thing. You want to be in Nando's, out, get the chicken, get the food, get the corn, get this, right? Easy. You're all now like, is there a Nando's in Victoria? I don't think there is. Is there? Is there? Who's going to Nando's for lunch? Okay. But Nando's in the airport hasn't brought back paper menus. And I'm like, why? Okay, I understand during COVID. Why have you changed something that didn't need changed? Like, it slowed the whole process down. I was getting anxious because I'm scrolling and then like, oh, I forgot what kind of chicken, so I've got to scroll all the way back to the top. And I'm sitting there and it just ruined it didn't ruin the experience, but it was just like, when there's things in life that don't need changed, sometimes you just got to ask, why change it? Do you not know what it does to me? It just frustrates me so much. So these are like stupid little examples. Well, the fogging up car thing is more of a serious one, but examples of the world we live in, changes all around us, and those are silly examples, but there's significant examples that we all deal with every day that just kind of add to this melee of like frustration and like, why change something that didn't need to change? You see, we're living in a time of unprecedented change. Change is speeding up more than it ever has. And you think, oh, no, but when they moved from like here to electricity, like that was a big bonus and shift, but to do with communication and expectation on us as a people, and someone texts you or emails you or snaps you or whatever the thing is, you have that expectation to get back to them within so communication is one of them. There's a whole bunch of things that change and shift, and what it affects us. Change affects us. How do you deal with change? When you see change coming down the tracks, are you like, here we go, I love change. Oh, it's been a minute since I've had any kind of change. Or are you one of those who's just like, Or are you kind of like, oh, I'll show you change who's boss? You see, usually we are one or the other. And what's really fun is when you're married to someone of the opposite, one of you is like, I love change. Change is my best friend. And the other person's just like, I hate it. It makes me anxious, makes me angry. You see, change can bring amazing opportunities for us and our world, but it can also be extremely unwelcome. In 2024, with anxiety levels being at their highest, I was speaking to someone this week. 8 out of 10 life insurance policies are being taken out right now. 8 out of 10 people are on anti-anxiety medication. The underwriters are looking, going, oh my goodness, the change that we've been through since the pandemic and the way the world is shifting, 8 out of 10 life insurance policies are being taken out, and 8 out of 10 people are on anti-anxiety medication. Change is all around us, and it's not making us feel happy. It's not making us feel warm and fuzzy. It's not just change. There's many other reasons that drive that figure, that stat, but change is one of them that largely does not help us in our life. It's usually, largely, most people don't say, I love change. And yet change is inevitable. Change brings great things. So what I want to do today is invite you into a story where Paul the Apostle, he encounters extremely changing and challenging times. And what I want to draw out is like his hope in Jesus is what anchors him. Paul the Apostle is facing his world is like turned upside down, and how his hope in Jesus is the thing that anchors him. You see, in our story, which we're going to read in a second, Paul arrives in this city called Athens. Last week I had a TV. This week, I'm sorry to say, I've had COVID. I'm negative today and have been for a few days. But I didn't get time to make the slides. I would have said, here is Athens. It's in Greece. Remember last week we were looking at a place and going, it's in Greece. We're still in Greece. This is the area. For those of you who are tracking with the chronological part of Acts, you're going, what happened to Thessalonica and Berea? We're going to deal with that later in the summer. We're going to kind of compare them and contrast them as how some people groups are going to accept the gospel and some are going to reject the gospel. But for today, we're kind of skipping over that to Athens. Paul arrives in Athens because of what's happened in those places. So Paul is unexpectedly in Athens because in Berea, he had to move, had to leave, and he was kind of taken safely, basically, to Athens and kind of be like, Paul, just you stay here, lay low, because there's people who are wanting to kill you. So this is the context. Paul not planning to be in Athens in the first place, not probably enjoying this sense of delay, this sense of stuckness, maybe this sense of worry and anxiety that could be building as he finds himself in a foreign city unexpectedly with no idea why he's there. Acts 17, verses 16 to 21 say this. While Paul was up on the screens, if you want to have it, or if you've got your Bibles or devices, while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, basically those he was traveling with who were taken to a different place, Paul was in Athens by himself waiting. While he was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace, day by day, with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Some of them asked, what is this? What's this babbler trying to say? Others remarked, he seems to be advocating foreign gods. They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. So they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting. You're bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we'd like to know what they mean. And then look kind of comments in the brackets here. You see all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there, they spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. The opening verse of our text today says that Paul was waiting in Athens, or maybe stuck in Athens. And whilst he's waiting, he's distressed. He's distressed to see that the city is full of idols. Distressed. It's an interesting word, right? The Greek word is paroxuzo, meaning irritated or provoked. But it can also mean stimulated or spurred on. The Greek word I always thought was like Paul gets in Athens and he's really like fired up and judgmental. Oh, like you bunch of Athenians who got your ways. But the word doesn't necessarily mean he's angry or frustrated. It can also mean he's like stimulated or spurred on or kind of compelled to do something. And so he's distressed. Whether distressed, provoked, or stimulated, Paul is led to engage in Athens during this time of waiting. Like, he's thrown into the situation, and because of what he sees, he is thrown into engaging with the city. I think it's just worth pausing and recognizing. Like, some of us see change coming down the tracks, and we open our arms and say, this is the best day ever. Others are resistant. Sometimes our response is not just like, oh, I don't like change. Oh, I do like change. Sometimes we can be like angry. We can be like frustrated, either at the change or the person who seems to be bringing the change. Sometimes it can be like, I don't know why you're doing this, but just some of us are hardwired to kind of react against that, right? Some of us kind of see change and we're like, oh man, you've just opened up a world of possibilities. Like, oh, I wonder what we could do with that change. Again, we're usually one or the other. But it's just important to pause. We often think maybe Paul through our own lens, and often it's been, how this has been preached a lot is, Paul comes to Athens and sets them all right. What I hope to show is that Paul comes to Athens and reveals Jesus to them. When we decide to engage like Paul did, and this is where I kind of get this broad picture that Paul isn't coming heavy-handed and hard-hitting. Paul's actually coming because he's coming to reveal Jesus, because the first thing it tells us, it doesn't say that Paul came and sorted them out. What does it say? It says Paul reasoned. Verse 17, he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks. This word reasoned is a specific word. It's not preaching. Like, we've had preaching elsewhere, we've had dialogue. It's the word that kind of, the Greek gives us the word dialogue, but it's not like you speak, I go back. It's not a formal debate. It's not just a conversation. It's not preaching. It's something else where it's more of a Socratic dialogue where you really listen intently to the person, asking question after question after question, to really help get to the root of what they believe and why they believe it and how they got to those beliefs. So it's not like, let me hear your version of the truth, I'll tell you mine. It's much more, why did you think that? Oh, that's intriguing. Have you always thought that? When did you start? What are some life events that have really focused you in on those beliefs? Tell me how you feel about those beliefs and how they serve you in life. It's asking questions to get at the foundation of why a person would believe what they believe. So Paul, remember, he's seeing this, a city full of idols, and he's distressed by it, spurred on, or even, out of sorts. And rather than going in hard-hitting, heavy-handed, he comes and he's like, tell me more about this. You see, I think a lot of Christians can learn from Paul's approach. It's not that he's light on truth. Rather, he's an expert in understanding the cultural moment, and he's incredibly respectful in asking, what do you think? Why do you think what you believe? Church, when we shout, all people hear is the volume. They don't hear Jesus. Paul reasoned, which involves listening. What matters to them. Why it matters to them. So that's the first thing, Paul reasoned. That's just a good lesson for us in our society and culture that believes many, many different things. We are known for being more of a debate club than a reasoning group, right? We're known to be like, just wait, here we go. I'm going to slap you down with my truth. It's kind of the attitude, it's what the church is known for, sadly. Oh, the church doesn't want to listen. Paul, when he goes into a city like ours, he doesn't debate. The philosophers will come to him in a second, they try to lure him into debating, and you kind of see he resists. He reasons with them. It's like, tell me more. I'm fascinated. We've not done that well, right? Over the last number of years. It's what's led to the church being viewed as irrelevant, out of touch, judgmental. We can learn a lot. So that's the first thing, he reasoned. Who did he reason with? The second question, who did he reason with? Well, firstly, we're told he reasons with Jewish people and God-fearing Greeks in the synagogue. These are people like religious folks. Religious folks, as was his custom, he goes to the synagogue and he engages with those who are already worshiping Yahweh, who are already worshiping God. And he starts with believers in God and says, can you see from your own scriptures where Jesus is? And he uses the scriptures to reveal Jesus. That's been the path and the direction of the early church. In the synagogue, they use the Old Testament scriptures and say, can you see where Jesus is? It all points to him. That's the first group of people. But he's reasoning with them. Again, as churches, we can be like, oh, I don't agree with what you believe. Oh, like, we're really the true Christians. And then, rather than going, oh my goodness, tell me how I believe that. That's fascinating. Yeah, it's not my practice. It's not my view. But like, I'm really intrigued. The first group is he reasons with those in the synagogue. The second group is he reasons with those in the marketplace. It's worth mentioning a bit about the marketplace in Athens. It's very different to the temple courts in Jerusalem. Remember, Jerusalem, we've been here, we've talked about the fact that the church was meeting in households, and at the temple courts, they were still had a presence in the synagogue, but really their meeting place as a church was the temple courts. In the Jerusalem temple courts, you had a ton of different views, people speaking. It was fairly informal. The church gathered there because it was probably like a covered space, and that's where they could gather, and then they grew quite large, and that's when the persecution broke out. But the temple courts were more like, it's kind of an informal gathering space. In Athens, the marketplace, the agora, which is the Greek word for marketplace, it's just kind of different. Tim Keller mentions the agora, and he says this. The agora in Athens, specifically, is more like the top colleges. We're going to do a bit of a U.S. study here. I know we're Canadians, but this is Tim Keller, who was he's from the U.S. So he's got like, these are his examples. He said the agora is more like Yale, Princeton, Stanford, and Harvard. The newspapers like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and Hollywood all brought together in a fairly formal package. So if you lived in Athens and you wanted to hear, like, what's the latest view, what's the latest religion, like more in an official way, like what's happening in not just Athens, but Athens was the cultural hub of the world at this point, certainly the known world. And so this is not like more informal, like in the Jerusalem temple courts where there's different things happening. This is like everyone comes together and here's the main ideas. All rolled into one, and Paul takes the message of Jesus right into the heart of the marketplace. Isn't that awesome? Right into the heart of the culture. There goes Paul with the message of Jesus. You see, so distressed is he by all of these other beliefs and idols that people are adopting. What it feels is like there's this pull now towards, oh, this is why he's here. Sometimes God allows circumstances that feel like changing and we don't like because you all of a sudden come upon a situation like Athens, and Paul's going, okay, I'm going to take the message of Jesus right into the heart of this cultural center. So this is the second group of people. Probably like elites, philosophers, and we're told that a group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate. Not reason, but to debate. And it feels like they want to shoot down his ideas because they call him a babbler. When I heard that, I thought like just someone who just talks and talks and talks. It's not that. It literally means, again, the Greek here is like someone who literally picks up scraps off the ground and makes a living by doing that. So in the sense of it's like, oh man, his ideas are so dumb. Like, he literally is like picking up scraps off the ground. That's how low they are. We're elite. We're like the Yale and Stanford and Princeton and all these. We're the New York Times and what. Like, they were snobs. They were societal snobs, if you want to say that, right? And they were looking down on Paul because he comes in the heart of it. And they're probably dissatisfied at the fact he's not picking up their bait and having a debate, right? Oh, come on, please, come on. So they're like, oh, you're babbler. Oh, he's not pushing back. So eventually they are like, hey, you got to go and meet a third group of people. Remember the synagogue, marketplace. You got to come and meet a third group of people, and then they'll probably sort him out because they're really the smart ones. And it's the meeting of the Areopagus. The Areopagus is a council in Athens who ruled on legal cases, a bit like judges would, but they also controlled which religions were allowed to be followed, which ones can be taught, which ones can be followed. So the philosophers in the marketplace, they were like all these brand new ideas. This was not a unusual thing. There would have been like, a new idea's come up. Let's go to the Areopagus and see if they kind of rubber stamp it. Like, this is good. We will allow this. But what we get is this beautiful picture and window of why Paul, in the middle of massive world turning upside down, he's in Athens, it's not the plan, how he makes sense of why he's there. And I love the question they ask Paul. They say this, may we know this new teaching. What is this new teaching that you're presenting? You're just bringing these strange ideas to our ears, and we'd like to know what they mean. And then I love that little thing. This is kind of all they do. They spend all their time just like talking about new ideas. Talk. All you do is talk. So paraphrase this. In other words, Paul, we've literally heard every version of religion you can imagine because these philosophers don't shut up about it. Like we've heard everything. We've not heard this. This you're talking about, like this dead guy who came back to life and he ascended into heaven. This is new. Tell me more about this. They're sensing it's not just a philosophy. Paul's been talking about a guy who actually lived, documented Jesus Christ. Documented death, documented resurrection, documented ascension to heaven. It's almost, Luke, who writes the book of Acts, it's almost like a cheeky understatement where he says, you're bringing some strange ideas to our ears. Like they're hearing this thing of like, this is not a strange idea. This is like, he can't be serious, right? So it's almost like a bit kind of underplay intentionally by Luke. Again, sometimes when the Bible's trying to be funny, we don't always get there, but it kind of got the feeling of there's this detachment of like, what are you talking about? We don't understand what's happening. So it's new to our ears, and here's what Paul says, found in verse 22. Paul stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, people of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. So you're ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. Church, I absolutely love this. I love the tone, and here's why. He is not mocking them. I often thought that word ignorant was him like, oh, you're ignorant, you're just dumb, you don't know any better. Notice there's a sense of respect. Paul has been waiting, and whilst he's been waiting, he's begun to notice a thing or two. He's noticed that this city is very different, it's very complex, like our city. And he's taken the time to walk their city. And maybe he's found an altar to a god, and he's looked at the inscription, and it maybe says who the god is. Then he's walked around and he's found another one. Oh, there's another one. And who's this to? Oh, interesting. And there's another one. Oh, it's interesting. There's a lot of gods in this city. And then he walks to another one and he says, wow, it's like to an unknown God. Oh, They don't even know who they're worshiping. You see, before speaking, Paul takes time to understand the spiritual and cultural landscape of the city. He looks carefully at their objects of worship. And he doesn't, when he calls them ignorant, that word ignorant, I think it comes from the same Greek root as the inscription when it says to an unknown God. The word ignorant is in a sense the same Greek root. It doesn't really mean like you're ignorant and like, come on, dummy. It's more like you just don't know. Like you're unknowing. It literally means you're unknowing. So when he kind of uses the very search of their heart. They put it on a thing saying to an unknown God. He's like, you're right. You are unknowing. He doesn't come in and he's not like, oh, you're just a bunch of ignorant Athenians and I've got the truth, let me tell you. He's like, I hear you, I understand. Like you're searching. And the very thing you're searching for, like the unknownness, you're right, you are unknowing. In a sense, hey, you're searching everywhere and you still haven't found what you're looking for. So you don't know the Lord, let me tell you about him. And then in verse 24, he says this about God. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by human hands. Remember, he spent days in Athens. What's there lots of there? Temples built by human hands. And he's not served by human hands. What is there in those temples? There's lots of people serving the people in Athens as a way of interacting with the divine. So he's like, it's not in like your temples and your priests. He says, rather, God gives himself. He himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their land. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far away from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. Oh my goodness. There's lots to the method of what he is teaching, how he's choosing to teach the Athenians. It's a very different method to what you'd find him saying in the synagogues. I don't want to get into that, like the technical aspect of how he is choosing to kind of format his teaching, because I think there's a bigger thing in the time we have today, and that's just to mention Paul is basically acknowledging the search that every human heart goes through, just like us. He just acknowledges every single one of us searches at some point. Every single one of us is searching for God. And he says, at one point, we're actually given life and breath by God. And the fact that we're given life and breath, and then he says, everything else meaning all the good that creation provides us, love, spouse, children, vocation, a sense of purpose, life, breath, and everything else. When we experience and taste the life and breath and everything else that God put there, we're kind of inherently drawn to find the source of that gift. So he's kind of like, yeah, like the search you have, this search you're on, let me just say, the very life and breath and everything else that you experience day to day, it's kind of like God, it's kind of like you're so close. If someone gives you a beautiful gift, there is something in us that seeks to acknowledge the giver, right? There's something that just goes, oh, I want them to know how grateful and how much this has brought a transformation in life. Sometimes when people give anonymous gifts, then you're like, oh, I really hope they know, because there's something in us that wants to connect with the giver, right? Paul tells them, because you are living and breathing, you've already encountered him because he is closer than you know. He's not far from any of us. The fact that you live and move and have your life and seek, the fact that you make all these altars and temples, the fact that you have so many gods and idols, you're so close, you're searching so much. You do this because God is close, and this is your attempt to reach out and connect with him. It's so easy to be judgmental of the multitude and the melee of spiritual experiences that people have. Oh, what is it this month? Oh, is it blah, blah, blah? Is it blah, blah, blah? It's so easy for us to be condemning. It's so easy for us. It's not where Paul goes. It's not where he goes. He's like, I can't believe you're so close. You've even got an inscription for the very God you're seeking. You just don't know his name. And this is it. When that same thing of a gift is given to us, let me tell you, like, when a gift is given, having connection with the giver is always more rewarding than the gift itself. The fact that someone would give in such a way is always more rewarding, because it's like, I see that you chose to do this. I see that you gave sacrificially or creatively in that gift. And we could say it this way: it's a profound gift to learn that the God that we searched for so long, all the while was searching for us. How did he put the search in us? Because he gave us life and breath and everything else. And it's a way of us living and figuring out. And so when people don't come and gather on a Sunday and they worship at other altars, they're still searching. It's not just that they're dead to it. It's that they're thirsting after something. We would say, Jesus, like this, like you're the giver of the life and the breath and everything else. And the relationship that we experience with Jesus is far better than anything he gives us. And it's that same way. It's like when Paul goes in the chaotic situation, he's in Athens and everything's upside down. Just that memory that Jesus, in the midst of the chaos, the relationship with the giver is always bigger and better than the gift. What would Paul say about the idols in Victoria, about Greater Victoria on the peninsula? You could simply say it this way: what do your neighbors worship? What do your neighbors worship? In his book, The Air I Breathe, Louis Giglio, founder of the Passion Conferences, a great leader in the States, he says this about how do you know where and what you worship. He says this, it's easy. He says you simply follow the trail of your time, your affection, your energy, your money, and your loyalty. At the end of that trail, you'll find a throne. And whatever and whomever is on that throne is what's of highest value to you. On that throne is what you worship. You see, I personally think so much of what we see today under the umbrella of spirituality is a valid search to find God. But their end of their trail on that throne is an inscription that maybe says to an unknown God or another idol or another thing. It's not Jesus. But we have a role to play in this. We have a role to play in this when we engage with people who are on the trail. That we're on our own trail every single day. We choose the things to worship, the things not to worship, the things to put before Jesus or not put before Jesus. We've all got a throne, you know. We could all say, well, is mine this week? Is it Jesus? And you do, well, how much time and money and effort and energy and anxiety have I expelled on this thing? Jesus, I'm really sorry that you've taken a back seat this week. It's not we're in here going, oh yes, their thrones. It's our thrones too, folks. But when we meet people like this in Athens, when we meet people in our area, we just shouldn't tear down. We shouldn't judge their trail being any different to ours. So that's what the philosophers did. They were judging Paul and trying to tear his trail down. Really? You that's what you think? You're just like a guy who walks around picking up scraps. That's how little we think of your idea. We shouldn't be like that with people. We're to approach. We're to listen. And we're to dialogue, we're to reason, and we're to seek to recognize the search and the trail they're on. And we're just to come alongside and say, can I just show you my trail? And like, it's imperfect. I hope most of the time it leads to Jesus. But we're just to kind of open our lives and say, this is who God is for me. This is my trail. This was my search. You see, humbly, when we reflect, and when we reflect on our own time and affections, energy, money, loyalties, it is transformational to people. And we read in the end of the text, which we didn't read, that some people, not all, but some in the Areopagus and others who were key people in the city gave their life to Jesus because there was something in Paul's approach that they said, yeah, I see the trail that leads to Jesus. I want to be on that trail too. You know when that doesn't happen so well? It's when we just come in with bullets and with bombs and with like better theology. It just pushes the person on the back foot and they go, I don't want to listen to you. So that's my encouragement. My encouragement is in the lives that God has brought you into, no matter how chaotic they feel, whether it's your son or your daughter, your sibling, your parent, your grandchild, and you look at their life and you go like, I don't even know how to start. Their views are so different to mine. All you have is this testimony of the trail that you choose to follow or not follow every day. And I just want to encourage you, the only way to see the trail is when you come in the posture that Paul took. So God has got an amazing, amazing opportunity for us as a church in this area to exist in an area like Athens and just allow the goodness of God to have a light shown on it. If you mentioned Alpha earlier on, one of the reasons we are committing to doing Alpha is partly because of the pace of Alpha. You know the worst person who can help on Alpha is someone who likes answering questions that no one else is asking. Oh, let me tell you, because I know this one, but no, they're not there yet. Oh, no, but they really need to know. You know what? That's just you kind of coming in with debate, not reason, and not listening and thinking. One of the reasons we love Alpha is because it goes so slow. It just invites people in to think. The first few weeks are all about, tell me more. Like, I'm fascinated. It's one of the reasons is because there's so few places in society that is truly like this where you can say, tell me more. Sadly, there have been so few places in the church where people know they can truly come in and just ask questions. If you're here today and you are searching, if you're here today and you are researching, if you're here today and you're literally going, I know all this, there's always a role that God has for us. It's just when we come with that last attitude of, I know all this, we can be extremely unhelpful for the kingdom of God when we go into cities like Athens and Victoria and the peninsula, where people want the dialogue, they want that conversation. But unfortunately, Christians, we want the debate. So that's the kind of church we want to be. That's where we're positioning ourselves. If you don't like it, there's other great churches, honestly. We're not going to be a church who drops bombs and pushes people away because they're not all the way there yet. We want to be a place that caters for searchers, caters for people who are seeking. Our desire is that we run Alpha and it becomes a catalytic effect in our church that you just know where, man, like if I'm having a conversation with someone at work, I should bring them to Alpha because that's a safe place to have conversations. It's not the only place, but it's a good place. We want to be a church that you can come and say, I'm having a conversation with someone at church, having a conversation with someone at work, and we don't say, when are they coming to church? Rather, we say, how can I pray for you in your engagement as you're talking to them? As a church, we've got to be so open to say, I see the search, and you're so close. Believe me, an altar to an unknown God may not feel close, but when you remember that this is in their unknowing, they've been searching the whole time unknowing, God is closer than they realize. He's closer than we think. So for your neighbors and your work colleagues and those in your classroom, your family members, you may have stopped praying, you may have stopped engaging. God is closer in their lives than you realize. Let's pray. God, we are living in this place by no mistake. Sometimes, God, it's like, oh, can we just reverse by like 40 years and go back to how things were? Can we, be easier? But God, you've brought us here in this area, and you've brought us together as a church for such a time as this. God, when a society thinks the church has nothing to offer. But Jesus, you have everything to offer. You've provided life and breath to those we love and care about. You've given them everything else, like Paul mentions. And God, our prayer is that you would begin to turn those gifts into conversations and conversation starters where people can get in touch with the giver of the gifts. God, we absolutely long for those we care about to know you and to come into a relationship with you. Would you help us? Would you help us as we, go on the trail every week, following the trail and what we do with our money and our time and our affections and our conversations? God, let Jesus be the result. Let Jesus be in the throne. Help us so that others will be drawn to the Jesus that we follow. Stir us and forgive us, God, for times that we have come in with a heavy hand. Stir us, God, for what we see here. This posture that invites people to come and meet Jesus, knowing that Jesus can hold up against every single philosophy and every single view and version of truth. Jesus is present. We don't need to hide behind him. Our faith is valid and it holds up. Just keep us from being prideful. We just ask, Jesus, you'd keep us from being prideful and you'd keep us humble. We ask in your name. Amen.